Although school is not for everyone, do not let people discourage you from pursuing a higher education. We need the upcoming generation with better mindsets to become our next lawyers, judges, doctors, etc. We need good people with real morals and values in high places. And that quote is a tweet by Megan the Stallion. And I really love that tweet because it came for me off the back of B. Simone and kind of putting down 9 to 5s and stuff like that. And I'm going to address that a little bit later on in the podcast. But yeah, so when I saw this tweet by Megan Thee Stallion, like, I'm very pro education, and that's not to say that people who haven't gone down that educational route won't be successful, but I think there is a level of, especially as a black woman, credibility that I bring to the table, having acquired certain levels of education, that has enabled me to kind of push my career and project manage my career in certain directions. I've also just finished watching the final episode of the recent season of Insecure. And if you haven't watched already, you might want to fast forward this podcast a little bit, because I need to share a little bit of frustration. Like, I need to just get out before we get into the meat of this podcast. Hell, Condola was coming with her condolences. Lawrence is going to be a father right when him and Issa have now managed themselves. Hell, God, Issa cannot get a break. Honey needs to take a Kit Kat. This is what happens when you go on breaks in relationships. You can't account for where somebody is putting their vagina or their penis. So it's better that you just part ways forever and ever. Amen. But yeah, I think Issa Rae is an amazing creative. I think she's an amazing writer. I've really enjoyed this season, and a friend of mine told me that season 5 is currently being written, which I'm so excited about, because they've left us in a cliffhanger. There's so many different themes that were explored in this season, and I've really enjoyed watching Insecure. It's fantastic. What I'm also going to do is, at the end of this episode, I'm actually going to recommend some programs that I've been watching, or some films that I highly recommend, because I know, especially on my Snapchat, everybody really enjoys a lot of the recommendations I give. And I have been watching kind of a lot of films. I've discovered a couple of programs that I really want to share on the episode, because I know some of us just need some downtime, because there's a lot happening at the moment. There's a lot happening in the black community. We are constantly being triggered every single day. And I think sometimes we just need to take some time out to self-care. That, you know, self-care is one of those things that are on my vision board. So I'm very conscious about self-caring and making sure that I take time to look after my mental health. So just before we get into the meat of this, because this episode I have entitled Culture Vetting, and I cannot wait to get into this. I made like a couple of notes. There's a few things we need to discuss and get down to the bare bones. But I don't want to kind of get onto the meat of it until I've just addressed a couple of things. So Misha B, who was a contestant on X Factor, has recently shared her experiences of the X Factor process, in particular being vilified for being a black woman, effectively, by Louis Walsh and Talisa. I've never really liked Talisa anyway, and I think Talisa is a classic example of somebody who appropriates black culture and then polices black women. And she should know better, because she has indulged in the benefits of black culture, and I believe to an extent has had an experience, albeit through friends or just being around the black culture, of some of the things that black women go through, and constantly being confronted with stereotypes when a woman is confident is just disgusting. And you know, hearing Misha B talk about her experiences, to be honest, it took me 24 hours to watch, because I knew that I would be triggered watching it. And it was really upsetting to hear that, you know, she felt suicidal, and really the extent of the bullying that she encountered. And I think, you know, it's a difficult time, isn't it? Because I think as black people, we are now using and utilizing our voices, but we are triggered because each and every one of us has our own story to tell. And I think when you're in a reality show or on the TV, I think as black women, we have this heightened sense of alert to our own blackness and how our blackness could possibly offend. And I'm speaking from a position of somebody who was in a reality show. In 2014, for those who don't know, I was in Big Brother, and I had an amazing experience in Big Brother. And, you know, everybody knows that I don't really talk about Big Brother, and that's just because I have my own issues, okay? And I have said this already today on my Snapchat, and I'm going to say it again. You know, when I was on Big Brother, when I came out of the house, I found out that my dad had passed away 2 days before. So my mental health and everything was completely compromised. I went through a lot. I had quite a few contractual obligations as well. So by day, I was fulfilling my contractual obligations and certain things that, you know, my team had acquired. And then at night, I was planning a funeral. But in terms of the actual Big Brother and the production and the producers, I was very well taken care of. I can't fault them. From the psychologists right down to like head producers, I was very well liked. I had a very good relationship with them. So I definitely don't necessarily feel that my issues lay with them, but my issues lie with the UK press. And I am going to discuss it when I'm ready. And this is kind of what I was saying on my Snapchat, because a lot of people ask me if I can share my experiences in light of what Misha B has spoken about. And I was very clear, and I'm going to be really clear on this episode as well and have it here so other people can hear it. This is Misha's time. Misha has taken a lot of time to process this. She's gone through a lot psychologically. She has PTSD, and I think that we need to afford her that time to be able to use her voice and for us to receive what she's saying. I don't think it's the right time for people to now, like myself or anybody else, to kind of take that away from her. So I'm very conscious to not talk about kind of my experiences with the UK press in relation to being in a reality show, but I will talk about it, and I'm planning to do an Instagram live at some stage. I'm just not ready yet. I think before I get into having that conversation and being comfortable, I need to speak to my therapist before I do that. And I have been very conscious to kind of just stay away from the media. I think I have my own trauma as a result of how I was treated by the UK press. And I've gone as far as making sure that I have attained some press clippings just to give people an example of what I went through and the things I had to endure when I came out. And I'm really going to be honest about, you know, what I went through, but I'm just not ready to do it yet. And I think one thing that we need to appreciate is Misha B has not only gone through so much, but it's taken a lot of courage and a lot of strength for her to be able to share, you know, what she's been through, and to hear it is quite painful, I think, for all of us, especially because we all remember Misha B. She's talented, she's fantastic, but we're more sickened by Talisa. And I think this is what I was saying in one of the previous episodes. When you allow people who are not from the community or the culture to appropriate our culture, you do so and you give them that license without any perimeters, and you do so very freely. But what happens is when you expect those people to then be allies, they are not, because ultimately they are not Black people. And I think someone like Talisa not only has benefited from our Black culture, but we've allowed her to appropriate our Black culture, benefit from it financially, finds herself on a reality show, like judging, and I don't even know how she got in that judge's seat, because I swear you need talent, but God forgive me, sorry. And then we watch her basically bully and rip to shreds the confidence of a Black woman who is just trying to share her talent with the world. And I think Misha B needs to be applauded for the courage that it took her to be able to share with us, because that is a gift to be able to share. But I'm sure there's other Black women just like Misha B who have their own story to tell, and it's about whether they're ready to. So whilst people are messaging me, constantly asking me, I think people need to just take the time before you message to think about whether that person is even in a headspace to be able to kind of go into that, because what you're asking us to do is to go back in time and start to unpack some of those emotions on a public platform. And sometimes people may not be able to do that. And I just want people to know that for me to take the conscious decision to completely remove myself from the media, remove myself from the public eye, there is a reason. And yes, part of it is working through the trauma of grief of losing my father, but the other side of it is the way I was treated by the UK press. And with time, I will speak about it. Who knows? I may have a therapy session this week and feel like next week I can have that conversation. But as for right now, I'm not ready to have that conversation, and I just really appreciate if people just respect my position on that. Talking about kind of what's happening in the press and everything, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about cultural vetting in terms of the workplace is basically off the back of B. Simone. So if you don't know who B. Simone is a reality star. She's a comedian, an entrepreneur, a powerhouse of a black woman. And she did an Instagram live recently, and she basically said that she wouldn't want to be with somebody who's a 9 to 5 and this, that, and the third. And I think I understood what she was trying to say, but it was the way she said it. And whilst we cannot start policing people's delivery, she was absolutely crucified on social media. And I think part of it is because a lot of her audience is 9 to 5, and that is how a lot of us earn our bread and butter. And it was almost making it seem like 9 to 5s were not good enough. And I get where she was coming from. I just don't think she explained it in the right way. And I think even for me, when I was in the entertainment industry, especially the African entertainment industry, I wasn't a 9 to 5 girl. There was a period of time where I just wanted to be footloose, fancy free, free-spirited, and just live my life. And I did. And I took, I guess you'd call it a career break. You know, white people will go traveling and backpacking in the rainforest chasing bears. I just decided that I wanted to explore, you know, the African entertainment industry, and I did really well. And then obviously went into Big Brother, and, you know, some of you know the story, some of you don't. And I kind of walked away from that and went back into my 9 to 5, developed my career further. And here I am today, you know, founder of the Toy Talks platform, which I'm really, really proud of. But I think that what I want to reiterate to everybody is having a 9 to 5 is not a bad thing if you have a plan. And I feel like when I went back into the world of work, my plan was always to reach as high a success peak as I could. More importantly, I wanted to make sure that I was in a financial bracket that I would, you know, be proud of. And I wanted to climb up the ranks of what it was to be a contract manager, which I did. So I started off as I was in retail, I did admin, then contract admin, then contract management, then senior contract manager. Now I'm a contract consultant, and I'm really, really proud of it. And I make it sound so easy, but it really wasn't. And I hope that, you know, during the process of all these episodes and podcasts, you can see that my journey has not been easy. And why I do this podcast is to show you guys and tell you guys where I went wrong, certain things that happen, share the micro and macro aggressions, the racism and the discrimination and all the things in between, to hopefully inspire you guys to just continue and to work hard and to focus, and more importantly to have a plan, because there's no point working hard if you don't have a plan. And I knew what my plan was. And at different stages, and I think I've said this before in previous episodes, you reach a crossroads, and every part of that crossroad leads to your success story. And the crossroads that I reached was also, you know, I felt like I reached a financial ceiling. I felt like every organization I was at a ceiling, and I know part of that was motivated by being a woman and being a black woman. And then when I went into consulting, I felt like the opportunity to earn a lot more money was there, and started to position. And I, you know, there's a lot of things I think when I was younger I could have done a bit differently, that would have got me to places quicker. But here I am today, and I'm able now to affect change in my community and affect black women's lives by having the Toy Talks platform. And you guys know that when it comes to the Toy Talks platform, it's something that not only am I passionate about, that I just want to share, and I want other black women to be successful. And to be part of being successful is being able to share the gems of how you got there. There's no point telling people work harder or, you know, just keep your head down. That's not helpful. I prefer to give you guys the tools so that you can go out there and affect your own success. And if you guys don't know, the Toy Talks mantra is: you are the architect of your own career, navigating the social aspects of the workplace safely whilst lighting the path to your own success. That is what Toy Talks is about. So I'm really happy that every week, every Tuesday, I'm able to deliver a podcast to you, and the feedback has been absolutely brilliant. Culture vetting. So when a lot of you join organizations, I think there is not a lot of emphasis that we place on the power of your probation period. So I want to look at the probation period from a vetting perspective, cultural-wise. I'm definitely thinking of doing a masterclass on passing your probation, because every organisation I've worked in, I've managed to pass my probation. And the one place where they extended it, I went along with it for 2 weeks, and I left and found an even better role. But that's an episode for another day. So when we go into these organisations, I think a lot of people are intimidated by the probation period. I think some of us process it as an opportunity to just be our best for 6 months in the hope that somebody would have mercy on us and keep us on in the job. And I think that I've always been very clear about what a probation period is, and it's an opportunity for you to vet the organisation too. Now, the reason why I talk more about the culture vetting is because every organisation has a different type of culture. So you can go into an organisation and they can have a culture of every Thursday, Friday drinking, and everything is centred around alcohol. All the funny stories are centred around alcohol and people have made themselves arses. You could have certain cultures whereby they're quite diverse and actually it's promoted that everybody kind of is themselves and people are not judged if they don't come to after work drinks. You have other cultures in certain workplaces that are fully functioned on gossip and tearing people down and stepping on people to get to where you want, and almost an unhealthy need to compete. There are some organizations that are like that, and I think when you go into an organization, it's so important that you just take the time to understand where you have inflicted yourself in. What has been inflicted on you? I think it's important for us to have it in the front of a mind of a plan. So whenever I start a new role, albeit as a contractor, I always, within the first couple of weeks, write down my observations, and I don't write it down in the office, I write it down at home. And it's basically an opportunity for me to also understand through a probation period, if I was a perm, where I fit in, how I fit in, understand who are the troublemakers, understand who are the gossipers, who are the kiss asses, because there's a handful of kiss asses in every organisation, I'll tell you that now. And also understanding how I fit in. Does this place work for me? Can I see myself here for about 2 years? Can I see myself positioning myself in a position whereby I can do what I need to do for my career, get what I want out of it, without having to necessarily embed myself in the negative aspects of the culture of this organisation? And understanding what strategic allies are. So there is a lot of things that I see online where people talk about alliances with fellow Black people and things like that, and that's great. But remember, I've said in a past episode, not everybody who is a Black person wants to align themselves with you. There's some organisations that I've worked in before where fellow Black people would deliberately avoid me. And I know where that comes from. I know that comes from, some of our own fears and our own trauma of maybe previous organisations we've worked in, or maybe we know that we're in the type of a culture in this organisation whereby if they see more than one Black person, they get a bit rattled. So I understand why some people may not even feel comfortable, kind of aligning themselves with fellow Black people, although I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go about it. But, I get it. So when I talk about strategic allies, what do I mean? So when I was at my entry level roles, I didn't understand that in order to be successful in an organisation, in order to have longevity in an organisation, it'd be really important for me to understand who are the influential people. So we're not necessarily talking about the office gossip who is always in the ear of the manager. It's sometimes the people who are head of legal. It's the people that you maybe work cross functions and you have interactions with maybe senior members of staff. So when I first started an entry-level job, I didn't get that. So as far as I'm concerned, I just stuck to my own department. And when I had to work with other people in other departments, I kept the interaction to a minimum. And I never really understood the importance of cultivating those relationships, especially when it comes to networking. So as an adult, I can tell you, I'm not really good at networking. And maybe we can talk about that later on in the episode. But in the workplace is a networking hub. And when we talk about strategic allies, if you're not prepared to do the work in understanding who your strategic allies are, you're not going to last long in an organisation. And if you manage to slip through the cracks and last long, you're not going to get very far, because it's the strategic allies who affect change in rooms that you're not in, or are able to defend you in situations maybe that you're not even aware of. So I never really, at an entry-level stage, interacted with people. And what happened is then I hit the stereotypes when, say, I had an opinion, I was being aggressive, or if I didn't agree with anything, I was being what do you call it? Not troublesome. What's that word? I was being indignant. You see, these Oyibo people, they've introduced me to words that I never even possibly knew existed until I entered the workplace. They have so many words, they have so many big descriptions of how black people are, and part of it comes from their own prejudice. A lot of these people haven't been to multicultural schools. The first time they see black people is if they're on the train or if they have to work with them. And for them, they'll tell you that because for them, if it was their choice, they wouldn't be around black people. They're uncomfortable. You understand? So all these words that used to fly around, and I used to always take the bait. So when they would accuse me of being a certain way, I was so argumentative. And I know that argumentative came from me trying to express myself, but because I didn't understand how to speak like them, I always found myself in trouble. I was always like almost like branded like the rebellious one. Or, like sometimes they'll call you a nickname and they think it's funny, but it's masking something. Like they would always, oh, trouble. So especially when I was in entry level roles, like early 20s, and I was quite short, they'd call me, oh, little trouble. And everyone would start laughing. And I never knew how to deal with that. So I rebelled against that name. And the problem is because I didn't stamp it out when it started, when then I raised issue with it, oh, you're just being difficult. And this just came from a level of immaturity on my side as well. And I think, when I was going into the world of work, I didn't really have anybody to tell me how to navigate. So I hit like the roadblocks. I fell into the traps really, really easily. And sometimes when I think about it, I just cringe, being told that I'm being aggressive in an email when I've sent a one-liner just to confirm that I don't have something. Like, how is that aggressive? Toya, do you have da-da-da-da? Oh, unfortunately, I don't have it. However, I could ask da-da-da. Oh, yeah, I felt that your tone. White people seem to see a tone in everything that a black person says. And it is not necessarily the email or the written instantaneous communication. It's just their perception of black people. But I didn't understand that. And I think this is why I feel like we're in a new territory now, because everything has come to the forefront. We're seeing the power of Black Lives Matter forcing conversations that we ordinarily probably wouldn't even have. But yeah, so when it came to strategic allies, I was just very bad at it. As I matured, as I learned from experiences, I realized that you almost have to be slightly manipulative. And I use that word quite loosely, but you do. You need to know who are the people that, are really influential. And I just happen to also as well, I am quite an outgoing person, and it does take a while for that side of me to come out. But whenever I had to work cross-function, so because of what I do, as a profession, I have to work a lot with like in-house legal or external legal. And obviously we speak in the same language because I studied law extensively, right up to law school to masters. So they're saying certain things, I know. The difference is as well with lawyers is that they don't necessarily have that commercial element, whereas that's where I come in as well, because I have the legal and I have the commercial element. So I always took pride in, being able to cultivate relationships where we had common ground. And I think a lot of us need to be a bit more strategic about that. There are going to be people that you like on a personality level. And I found that especially in the tech organization I worked for, the legal department were seen as quite, to themselves, and they didn't really have a good relationship with the rest of the departments, but I had to interact with them. And it was something I was told quite early on, oh, they're not, they're quite difficult. But the reality is I saw it as a challenge. And I said, right, if they're quite difficult, there's obviously a reason. Typically in-house lawyers are seen as quite difficult because they are doing their jobs. And having been in-house before, I get it. And obviously I'm bringing a commercial element that some of the lawyers don't have. And the head of legal, I remember, we're going to call him Tom. The head of legal was really he was just rude. And I remember one time I took some documents to him to review because I drafted this contract and he had to sign off on it because of the value. And basically he was like, yeah, I know I told you to come and sit down with me, but I just don't have the time for this. Just leave it here and I'll call you later. Like dealing with me like I was just some type of... And this continued for about a month. And eventually when he did sit down with me, he was just very rude, very disrespectful, questioning how I've drafted things and telling me, am I sure I'm experienced enough? Those little microaggressions. And I was really lucky because my head of department was really nice. And we're going to get onto her a little later. We're going to call her Jane. And I remember within the first few weeks of joining that particular organization, because they had a lot of people leave, Jane was very, 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 hands-on in terms of making sure that new starters were fine. So she checked in with me one day and I was just honest. I says, I don't really like the way that Tom talks to me, and I don't understand what Tom's issue is. I have to get stuff signed off by him because of the value of the contracts I'm dealing with. But yet he deals with me like I'm an irritant, and it makes me uncomfortable. I had to use some of those words that white people use. You have to, when I say speak like them, that's what I mean. I had to use, because if I'm speaking like them, I'm using the words that they're comfortable with. They're going to understand what I'm saying. So she was honest, and she was like, there was another lady that was here before you, and her name was Chloe. And she goes, and this is what Jane said, beautiful black woman. Like, obviously, she knows that Tom is suffering from some type of regression issues because my predecessor was black. That's basically what the issue was. So when Jane said, oh, a black woman, in my head I was like, you could have just said another woman. You didn't have to tell me she was black, but cool. I read between the lines, and this is what I mean by culture vetting. It's reading between the lines and understanding and being perceptive to the microaggressions and macroaggressions, and also the racial stereotypes that are covert in organisations. We know that the UK are fantastically mastered the ability to be covertly racist, and it's difficult when they're covertly racist, because when you are trying to tell them that, they'll tell you it's in your head. But anyway, we digress. So Jane was like, yeah, a beautiful black girl, she was lovely, but she just didn't do her job properly. She wasted a lot of legal time. So they do have, she goes, I'm not going to lie, they do have issues with the department. So I can understand why you would feel like that. And I said to her, that is Tom's issue to deal with. I'm not now going to have to deal with that, and I've only been here a couple of weeks. I suggest you have a conversation with him. And I used the leverage of the fact that, they didn't want me to leave. Obviously, I didn't want to leave, but I had to let them know that leaving was always going to be an option. Anyway, she had that discussion with him, and Tom's attitude completely changed. And I think it's because Jane was just very, very aware of, even though she was a white woman, she was very aware of a lot of the struggles that black people and black women go through in the workplace. And part of it is because she was dating a black man. But we're going to get on to Jane in a minute, because Jane, I actually love her. I think she's fantastic, but boy, I need to tell you guys about her. Anyway, and ever since then, Tom and I just got on really, really well. I think that he realised that I'm just coming to do my job, and yes, I'm going to get things wrong, but equally I'm willing to learn. And I had to kind of polish his ego a little bit. I told him, I'd seen him in the corridor, and even though he'd been a dick to me a day before, I'd be like, oh my God, you look so lovely. Oh, I really like that shirt. Every now and again, not overdoing it. And one thing about, especially Oyubo people in senior roles, is they're narcissists. So when you start playing into their, oh, you look amazing, you see his shoulders puffing up, puff daddy, puff, 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 shoulders. Yeah. And anyway, long story short, we started getting on really, really well, to an extent that, if, somebody came to him with a contract, he'd be like, oh, go and talk to Toya. Toya's done this before. I've signed this off with Toya. And he stopped reviewing my stuff. He just trusted that I was doing the right thing. And I think that I built up my credibility with him because I always delivered great contracts, and then I had great relationships with people in the team, and then working with the sales team, I was doing a lot of sales contracts as well. So, when they're on their little calls, they always feed back and they always talk about you behind your back. And I think that from there, he just became a strategic ally. I invested the time in understanding his character, how he works, what makes him tick. I really observed him, how he interacted with other members of staff and how other people saw him. So, in teams, you have conversations and people will tell you what they think. And I was really perceptive in understanding that. And I thought to myself, this is a person who is global head of legal. This is the type of person that you do make an ally, because you never know when you're going to need them. And I'm so glad that I took the time to invest in him in that way, because when I left this particular organisation, is it not the same organisation that had me back as a contractor? And when I was leaving and he found out, he was so upset, and he said to the head of department, whatever you need to do, you need to get her back. So when the conversation arose about me coming back as a contractor, they had this rule whereby if you've left, you can't come back within 6 months. They removed that rule for me, because obviously I had made, like, Tom wasn't the only strategic ally I made several strategic allies, but he was so influential that when I got back, literally he came, the first day I came back as a contractor, he came into the office and he gave me a hug. Do you know what that is? Like, that physical contact. You know, people don't do that, but it was to show you the level of relationship I had. It was a lot of respect. And I think when you are going into organizations, I think it is worth considering having strategic allies. So I had the head of global legal, head of global tax. I had certain senior managers and senior salespeople who I got on really well. And don't get me wrong, there were, especially after my probation, there were difficult situations that I had to deal with. But the leverage of them being a revolving door and not wanting to lose me was something that I often played on a little bit. And also making sure that I took the time to have certain relationships. So sometimes you have a chit chat. Oh, did you watch so and so on TV? I would have those conversations with my strategic allies, because that's part of developing the relationship, to extent where Tom would sometimes, he would come in and say, Toy, do you want to go for a coffee? One day when he said that to me, I almost fell off my chair. I was like, are we there? Okay, cool. And don't get me wrong, Tom had his own motive as well, because he wanted to know what was going on in our department. And he wanted to basically make me his little snitch, and it was never going to be that. So anything I said to him, I would say outwardly or publicly. I never allowed him to also use me as a weapon, because eventually, if I had said something, he would repeat it. You'd know that he would repeat it. And where he's going to say his sources? His source is Toya, especially if people see me around him a lot. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be smart and be almost cunning enough to give a little, but not give too much, and make sure that you position people in such a way that when you need them, when you need to fall back on them, they're there. Do you understand? So yeah, that was Tom. And I think one thing I learned a lot of things from that particular organization, is when you build strategic allies, when things go wrong, you get to test the weight of those allies. So this was the organization where I had that meeting with the head of sales, senior sales. And she basically swore at me and told me that the advice I was giving her was effing rubbish. You know, it was that particular organization where that girl said it. And obviously when it happened, I think I've gone into detail in a previous episode about it. And I remember when I was taking a contract to get signed off by head of legal, and he asked me if I was okay. And I was like, I had a bit of a situation where someone swore at me. Before I could get the words out of my mouth, he said, who was it? When was it? And what has happened? And I was like, no, don't worry, it's being dealt with. He goes, Toya, if it doesn't get dealt with, you come and see me. That's unacceptable. That's what I mean about cultivating allies. He's going to now, if that wasn't going to get dealt with, he will now take it where it needs to be to protect me. And that's the importance of strategic allies. They will protect you. And don't get it twisted, you're still at work. But it's understanding how and when to use these allies. And it is a bit of manipulation, I'm not even going to lie. There is a little bit of it. But fundamentally, I was really liked. And I was able to show parts of my personality to some of my strategic allies. And I actually liked them, and I took the time also to really make sure that I was good at my job. And I took the time to develop. And yes, there were times when I made mistakes and things like that, but my attitude was always, oh my God, I'll do better next time. And owning up to my mistake. If I've made a mistake, I just own it. Oh, I'm so sorry. That was an oversight. Obviously not making too many of them, learning from them, but more importantly, just owning them. And that is one thing I would say about my personality and just in life. Like, if I make a mistake, I own it. And when you're in the workplace, you're going to make several mistakes. And it's during your probationary period, I believe, that you're able to make as many mistakes as you like, ask as many questions, no matter how dumb they sound. All your dumb questions, they should come out during the probation period. And it's allowed because that's why it's called probation. And I would say cultivating strategic allies starts after your probation. So part of your probation period in the 6 months on a personal level should be, like I said, understanding who the key people are, who the troublemakers are, who are you going to cultivate as your strategic allies. And I would say you should have at least 4 or 5, depending on how big the organization is. And then I had a legal business partner, so a lawyer that sat in Tom's team, but worked quite closely with me and the division that I looked after. Again, that is a strategic ally, because clearly when the lawyers have their meetings and they're talking about the work they're doing, the legal business partner is tooting my horn because I have such a good relationship with her. I mean, even during this pandemic, she messaged me. She's like, "Hi Toya, how are you doing? Haven't heard from you for so long." Yes, she has my number. When I left, I gave her my number. Do you know why? Because this is the same woman that will give me a reference. Has given me a reference. Do you understand? I haven't had to go to the organisation and ask for a reference. I go straight to this lady and she'll give it to me, or go straight to my strategic ally. And this is why I say taking the time to understand your strategic allies, because you don't know when you're going to need them. You might not even need them when you're in the organisation. It's when you've left. So you're trying to tell me I can avoid a 2 or 3 week turnaround of a reference by going straight to my strategic ally and have it done in 48 hours. Make it make sense. When doing your culture vetting, it's really important that you stay away from cliques. In every single organisation I have had the benefit of working at, they will always tell you, you could never put me in a group. I floated between all the groups. And that's because when you place yourself in a group, say if one person in that group has a fallout with a head of department or just somebody who has a lot of influence, all of you get tarnished with that same brush. All of you get treated with the same disdain. All of you are now subject to the negativity that falls out of whatever happened. And I have been part of cliques in workplaces before. And what happens is, as a clique, when one goes down, we all go down. And then if you're fighting to not go down, they'll call you a troublemaker and manage you out. And whilst I haven't been managed out before, I've come close to being managed out, because rather than understand the dynamic of an organisation, I've just gravitated towards certain people and stuck to them. And whilst that's great, I think, your personalities may align with certain people, but you've got to understand you're at work, you're being watched, yeah? As daunting as that may sound, it's equally as important that you understand the importance of not necessarily belonging to a clique. So what do I mean by that? So at lunchtime, I'd go to lunch with different people from different teams. And I made it a point to do that. So whilst, my team, we would go to lunch now and again, there's other people in different teams. I might just see one of them and just say, "Hey, do you want to catch a coffee?" And I'll do it in front of people so they can see, so Toya, she can just, spread herself with everybody. Yes, because in every organization where you have the office politics, especially when you start, it's difficult to know where you're going to place yourself. So it's better that you don't place yourself anywhere. So I'd say within the first few weeks, so when I join organizations, they like to go to lunches, especially on your first day. It's so awkward. I don't want to eat in front of people, but I do it. And when it came to office drinks and stuff, but my stance before is that I'd never go to office drinks, because also as well, I don't drink alcohol, so I don't really want to be around it. And also you have to then start explaining why you would prefer to have a 7-Up instead of alcohol. People in the workplace who are, their culture is alcohol. They don't understand when somebody else doesn't want to drink. For them, it's a foreign concept. So I don't like having to get into that, but I understand that's part of the politics of the office. So within my first couple of weeks, I don't mind going to an office drink, because what happens is the first couple of weeks, people don't see you as anything. They're trying to place you. So when they want you to come to office drinks in your first couple of weeks, it's in order for them to kind of like suss you out. Equally, if you're doing your vetting, you should be sussing them out as well. And actually, they're playing the fool, because they don't see you as a threat yet, because they're trying to figure out where to place you. So they're equally going to get drunk. And it's in those vulnerable states that people are going to tell you the truth. And there has been many situations where I've gone to the office drinks and people have been honest. So a lot of my vetting has been fast-tracked by going to these office drinks. Now, what I would do is, when I first start an organisation, so within the first few days, they'll say, "Oh, you want to go to drinks?" And I make it clear, I say, "I don't drink, but yeah, of course I will come." Yeah. And then I would then introduce it into a conversation, probably back at the office, that I don't drink alcohol. And I would just, tell them like it's either religious reasons or personal reasons, and I don't go into much detail. And then what I would do is once every 3 months or once every 2 months, I will go to office drink. And I was listening to 50 Cent's new book, and he was saying something, and it's so true. Like, just get a lemonade, go to the bar, and ask them to cut a slice of lemon, put it in there. People think they're drinking gin and tonic. Yeah, that's how it's done. And so that's what I would do. And depending on the organization, so the tech company, I really liked them. I really got on with them. And they really did see a bit more of my personality than other places. So I would really go if I wanted to go. And if I didn't want to go, I wouldn't. But I never felt like I had to go. You know, other organizations, you feel like you have to go to pay like the party politics. But it wasn't like that with this organization. I think part of it is because it was very multicultural and it was a global. It was probably one of the best companies I have ever worked with or in relation to the people that I worked with. And people from different cultures, you'd go in a lift and you hear different languages. It was just such an amazing place, but management was mad and toxic. And then obviously it started to filter down. I digress. So I remember I was talking to you guys about the head of department. She was the global head of the department I was working in, Jane. And for some reason, Jane just had this, she really liked black people. And she'd tell you that. I really like black people. So when someone tells me they really like black people and they're white, I get uncomfortable because why are you telling me why are you trying to overcompensate? Like, what's going on? I later found out that she was dating a black man and all she used to talk about is black dick. That is it. That is all she used to talk about. Asking me, oh, when am I going to bring my partner to office drinks? That never happened. And as part of my cultural vetting, it would never happen. I'm not bringing my partner to the Christmas party, and he's definitely not coming to office drinks, because that's how they get to know you. And they're doing it, it's a strategic thing on their part, whereby they want to see you guys together, and it places you in a difficult position, because if someone's inappropriate, disrespectful or rude, it's difficult to be able to deal with it the way you want to, because you know in the morning you're going back to that office and you want to avoid that tension that disrespect will bring or that rudeness will bring. And Oyibo people don't know how to handle their drink. It's the opportunity for them to move rampantly mad. So why would I place myself in a vulnerable position by bringing my partner? It's just, that will never happen in a month of Sundays. It's just never, ever gonna happen. But Jane would like say, oh, has he got any friends that you can bring down? Like, she was just hungry. And she would be inappropriate. Like, we would go to the office drinks and she would buy everybody around, try and get everyone drunk. Me, I would take her card. She'll say, Toya, please get everybody around. Put my card behind the bar. No problem. Then I would put her card behind the bar and say, listen, homegirl wants to open a tab. Cool. And obviously she has to sign it before, you know, they would charge it. But I would get my drink and I would do just that. Like, I would get maybe cold water with ice. So, you know, as soon as they see the ice, they see a few bubbles, then they'll say gin and tonic. Me, I would just be looking at them. If they say it's gin and tonic, whatever they say it is. But me, I know it is the God's mineral water. Thank you. And during these office drinks, she will be telling us how much she loved black dick, this. It was just she was so inappropriate. It was mad. And she was asking everyone, oh, have you ever been with a black man? Oh, Toy, you're so lucky, this, that, and a third. This woman then translated it in the workplace, because she'll go to the workplace and she would create cliques herself. So it'd be the people that she really, really likes. She would like do staff meals and cut people out, or just not invite people, or she'll just send an invite and she might say ... And she used to do divide and rule. That's how she used to manage. And what happened was managers started to, like, other managers in different departments started to find out, senior people would find out and see her being like affording preferential treatment to other people. But because I did my vetting and I knew she was like this, and I could see it within the first couple of days, I could see it. I figured that I could use that to my advantage. So any courses I wanted to do, Jane is signing them off, you know, because she loved blackness and black people. So clearly she loved me, innit? Yes, and I utilised that. And when it came to like negotiating for like maybe courses that are a bit more expensive over the budget, I could do that, and I did it successfully. Or when it came for fighting for me in corners where I couldn't, especially if you work with salespeople. So some salespeople are disgusting. Their behaviour, their attitude stinks. And she used to be like the gatekeeper. So anytime anything happened and we went to her, she would deal with it. So I utilized her from that perspective, and she would always sing my praises because ultimately, as long as I was delivering, I was making her look good. The reason I say this to you is this all speaks to the vetting. And if I hadn't taken the time to understand the way Jane behaves, the way Tom behaves, and how I could utilize that for my own benefit, I wouldn't have been able to progress in that particular organization to the point where I've left that organization as a perm employee and then come back as a contractor on five or six times more money than I was on before. Do you know how deep that is when they're willing to do away with their rules about having people back within 6 months just so they can have you? They're making that exception for you, and that speaks to my work, it speaks to the relationship, but more importantly, it speaks to the fact that I took the time to vet them as an organization. Or everything that I found and everything I realized I used to my advantage, and strategically managed to move in within the ranks to get what I want. And sometimes it does require you to just be silent. There were days I'd come in the office and I'd just be quieter than usual. I'll just tell them I've got a headache. I ain't got no headache. I just decided that today I just wanted to observe. And I think there's a power in just being silent sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I think there's some places they'll tell you, oh, you're not interacting, but you need to find the right level. So I'd already cultivated myself as somebody who was, confident, somebody who did her job very well, made my managers look amazing, look better. I had good relationships with cross-functional teams. I made sure that I became an authority in what I was doing. And the way I did that is knowing it more than my boss. And because I knew more than my boss and I was delivering, I was making her look good. So she was singing my praises. And more importantly, the people that I had to avoid, I avoided. I was just cordial with them. Morning, everybody. I wasn't one of those people that come in the office. Morning, Tom, Frank, Peter, Sarah, Becky. No. Morning, everyone. Morning, guys. Have a good evening, guys. Get home safely, everybody. I was that person. But really and truly, half of these people I don't give a fuck about. Half of these people can't even stand. But it's about playing the position. So, and playing your role. And there is a clear line between playing the office politics and being fake. Everyone can see a fake a mile off. It stinks. Everyone can see a kiss ass a mile off. It smells. Being who you are and understanding that you can navigate the world of work without being a kiss ass, without throwing someone under the bus, and being confident in who you are. And don't get me wrong, there's certain conversations that will be had in the office. And I always say to everybody, during the vetting process, listen to the type of conversations that I had in the office. Listen to them. Do they talk about non-offensive things like Love Island? Are they talking about politics and someone's decided to tell you that they vote Conservatives? Just watch them. When I ask you who you vote for, you just say, I don't really talk about politics. I don't really understand anything. But these times you understand politics very well. For me, especially within the first few months, I'm always on the fence. I'm on the fence. I'm non-offensive, on the fence employee. And as people are getting to know you, you're getting to know them, but you're being strategic about how you're getting to know them. And I think if you just take the time to observe people, you'll see them for who they are. And one thing with Oyobo people is they don't stray far away from the blueprint. You're going to have the one there that is disrespectful and just doesn't understand boundaries. You're going to have the one that hasn't been around black people a lot, so decides on any given day that they're going to be Snoop Dogg. You've got one of them that is the crybaby of the team. You've got the snitch of the team. You've got the arse licker. You've got the troublemaker. You've got the one that clearly has a few screws loose in her head because she's willing to start trouble with anyone and everyone. Taking the time to understand who those people are and then how you're going to manage those characters while you're in the office. It's exhausting. Even as I talk about it, all the saliva is drying up in my mouth. But if you're going to work in a workplace, these are the things you're going to encounter. So it's better that you listen to this episode, understand it, digest it, and think about, how am I going to get what I need out of this organization? So if it's 2 years, 3 years tech experience, or 2 or 3 years finance experience before I go to my next role, how am I then going to make sure that I get what I need out of this employment to be able to move to the next? And keeping your head down is not an alternative. It's not even an option, because in an organization where you want to grow, you can't always keep your head down and hopefully not get noticed. Because if you're not going to get noticed, you're not going to get promoted or get exposed to certain opportunities. You've got to be keeping your head down enough to get your work done, interacting enough to be seen, and strategically aligning yourself with allies that make sense. And it takes a lot of experience. It takes often making bad judgment calls for you to understand in your next role, okay, fine, what is it in my last role in the culture that I didn't like? What have I learned, and how can I put this into practice going forward? And that needs to be kind of the conversations that you have with yourself going into organizations and as you progress and get through your probation. So if you guys want me to do a passing your probation masterclass, let me know. Email me at hello@toyatalks.com, and that is something that I would definitely try and do for you guys. In the last place I was working at, I was contracting at, this organisation, I remember going in on the first day and the energy was just negative. I felt it. And, when I was observing members of staff, they were always hunched over. Nobody was really smiling. It was just weird. It was just a weird atmosphere. And within the first 2 weeks, I was able to see that a lot of the managers are bullies. The way they speak to their staff, humiliate their staff in front of other members of staff. It was, to be honest, it wasn't a nice environment, and I definitely felt like it was taking a lot out of me every morning to go to this workplace. But I was a contractor, and as far as I was concerned, I'm going there as a business, and that had to be my attitude. So it's almost like you have to, especially as a contractor, you've got to put on your coat of armor when you go into these places. And I'm so happy for earpods and headphones, because when I go into these places, I put my headphones on and do my work. I wasn't really interested in developing relationships, just because, number one, I was a contractor, so you can get away with kind of taking that position. And number two, this wasn't the type of organization where you would want to kind of build like relationships, because they were very much about digging each other out, snitching on each other to managers. I would overhear conversation, because they'd forget I was there. So I'd hear conversations about, oh, this person is flirting with this person at drinks, and this person touched somebody in an inappropriate way. I was hearing all types of craziness, and I was just like, oh my God. But there was this one lady, and her name is actually Karen. I am dedicating a whole chapter in my book to this woman, because I used to talk about her on my social media platform. Everybody used to be laughing, but believe me, Karen was so problematic in the office, and she would do little things. So she knew my name was Toya. She knows my name's Toya because you see my name badge, you see my email address and everything, but she would call me Latoya. And for me, that is a microaggression, because you're not doing it with anybody else. I'm the only black person on the team. And also, you're taking the time to target me. So she would do it and I'd correct her. She'd do it and I'd correct her. So one day she done it and I corrected her, and she goes, oh yeah, I know what your name is. It's just easier to call you Latoya. And I said, well, it's easier to call you Beverly, but your name's Karen. And I just started giggling, and then everyone started laughing, because I did it in quite a playful tone. But her and I knew exactly what it was, because it was me establishing my boundaries. I recognised that there's no point trying to make an ally out of this troublemaker. My ally was the head of department who actually contracted my services. Then she would do little things like everybody had clear desk policy, and also as well hot desking. I think hot desking is problematic, but we move. And I think as we are in this pandemic and we'll get through the end of this pandemic, I don't think we'll see hot desking again, but I digress. So then I had a chair that I would normally sit at. And one thing about hot desking is if people are frequent a certain table and chair, people just kind of leave it for them. And that's what they were doing. But after that whole conversation about my name is Latoya, Toya, Beverly, whatever, she now made me her target. But I had done my observation enough to know that she would be a problem. I knew Karen would be a problem. It was just a matter of when. So one day I come in the office and she's sitting at my desk. And she goes, oh, Toya, you can sit next to me. I was like, no, it's fine. I'll find somewhere else. And I made a point of just sitting far away from her. I didn't realise that she had then said to my manager, well, not my manager, but the head of department, oh, I told Toya to sit next to me, but she didn't want to. Maybe I'll smell today. So you can see those microaggressions. And how did I know that? It was another member of staff that had told me quite innocently. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to nip this in the bud. Now, I already knew that the head of department would be my strategic ally, because he's the one that signs off my timesheets. And effectively, he's the one that would extend my contract. He is strategically placed. So I had to work at cultivating a relationship with him, whereby he understands not only am I here to deliver, but make him look good. And I had a load of projects that I had to deliver. So when I heard what Karen had said, later on that day, I went over to him. I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you were in today." He was like, "Oh, you're sitting down there." I said, "Yeah, here was just so packed. So I just decided to, meet other members of the team. So I decided to sit around there." I said, "If you need anything from me, just let me know, or just send me an email." I was like, "Oh no, don't worry about it, Toya." Then I went to go and get a coffee and noticed that head of department also drink the coffee. Now, safe bet, just get a latte. So I got him a latte. I said, "Oh, I noticed that you haven't gone to lunch, so I got you this coffee." "Oh, Toya, that's so thoughtful of you." Obviously, I bought him that because I knew that, you see, Oyibo people, making them strategic allies is not difficult if you observe them enough. And it's, for me personally, it was easy to do because it's quite cheap. So that coffee goes a long way in his mind. If you saw the look that Karen gave me, it was, "Bitch." Yes, because I'm not coming to do toe to toe with you. I'm going to make this man a strategic ally. So when you're chatting your shit, he may not defend me, but he's not going to take anything you say. He's just going to overlook. Anyway, push comes to shove, like there was a few things that Karen done. And as time goes on in this podcast, I'm sure I'll share them with you. And there was a point whereby Karen became so problematic that I felt like if I didn't manage this carefully, they wouldn't extend my contract. But upon actually leaving, when I did get to the end of the contract, they did extend it for a couple of weeks and then I left. Do you know that head of department rang me the next day after I'd left, and he basically thanked me from all the help that I'd given him, everything that I've done in the team, everything that I implemented from a contractual level, and completing the project. And he said, I really saw you as an intrinsic part of my team because you just delivered and you did what you said you were going to do. And in reflection of that, especially in relation to this vetting, culture vetting episode, it wasn't about going toe to toe with Karen. I set my boundaries with her. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to kind of step to her. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. I just had to play the office politics. And I knew how successful I was in playing the office politics by how that head of department interacted with me. But more importantly, it was the fact that I definitely had credibility because, more importantly, I nailed my job. And I feel like when you are doing a good job and you're delivering, anything they say outside of that is superfluous because you're there to do a job. And even now, like, I look back and I think to myself, I wish when I was younger, if I could speak to my younger self, I would say to stop taking my emotions to the office because there's nothing strategic in emotions. I feel emotions sell you out, and stop acting on emotions. And I definitely feel like when I was younger, I allowed people to wind me up and be their mouthpieces because that was one thing with me. I used to be a mini superhero when I was younger. So I used to fight for people who would never even talk for me and made myself a target. Whereas obviously as I've grown up and matured, I definitely am single-minded in my career and understanding how to navigate work. But I wanted to share that with you quickly, just because I feel like a lot of us go into the world of work and we're just hoping that we can coast through. And I think as Black women, we don't have that opportunity and we don't have that license to coast, because I feel like as Black people, we usually as Black women are minority, and that obviously makes us a target anyway. And I think if you go in with a plan, you have to go in with, right, this is what I'm trying to get here. I've always wanted to work for this company. I really think it would be good in my CV. I need to try and at least be working here for 2-3 years, 4-5 years. How am I going to get there? And thinking about that and being strategic in recruiting your strategic allies. And they don't necessarily have to be people in your team. It could be maybe somebody who is quite senior in your team, but I think there is a benefit if you work with cross functions, creating allies, and you will reap the benefit of it. Believe me, I've been there, I've done that, and I can testify of the fact that these people are still allies to this day. And I genuinely like them. And I think some allies you don't necessarily have to like, but I do genuinely like my allies. And I definitely have seen a growth in my career because of them and being able to rely on them when I've needed them. And more importantly, them being able to kind of celebrate and cheer for me when I've accomplished certain things that have made them look good. I think also it's really important that I touch on the fact that you can have a manager and be working in a department where maybe you even get along really well with your manager, but feel really alone and unsupported. And this is a feeling that I felt in many places that I've worked before. And I'm going to say this to every single black woman who has ever felt like this or feels like this. You have to be your own strength. Because as I have always told you, nobody can support you better than you. Organizations and managers don't owe you anything. And believe me, if a manager wants to manage you out or treat you like you're disposable, they will. And this is the reason why you have to do your vetting. And it's when we talk about a culture perspective, it's not just about the office drinks, it's everything. It's how people interact with your manager. You know, part of the reason you feel unsupported is because you have an expectation that your manager will. And yes, in an ideal world, a manager will manage effectively and be able to do that. But you're dealing with a lot of managers who are emotionally immature and are unpacking some of their emotional trauma in the office. How many managers have you met that have just flown off the handle for no reason? Or how many managers have you met that are so incompetent in their job that you question how they even got to where they are? You've got to understand a lot of these managers, they really are just emotionally broken. And what happens when emotionally broken managers are managing people? They don't manage them properly. And in fact, what they do is they end up breaking down their team. And this is why I've always had it at the back of my mind. I'm always going to be stronger than my manager, mentally stronger than my manager, and I'm always going to know more than her. So I place myself in a position of advantage where she needs me. And I have done that in every single place I've worked in the last 6 years. And I say 6 years because I think it was 6 years ago when I recognized the importance of making sure that I know more than my manager, therefore making her need me or him need me, and making sure that I manage them. And what do I mean by managing them? It's by making sure that I take control of my own career. So when they're coming to manage me, they think they're managing me, but I'm managing them and I'm controlling whatever narrative they're trying to spit out. Equally as well, I think that you need to be observant enough to see how that manager acts and interacts with other members of staff, and keep your ear to the ground. Like when people are having their office gossip, I never add my penny's worth. I'm the listener, I'm the observer. And I'm maybe nodding my head, but I'm not saying anything out of my mouth. And I think that has always served me very well. Because when things hit, like shit hits the flat fan, no one can ever say Toy said anything, because Toy never says nothing. But you may think I'm participating by nodding my head and listening. That's not participation. But it's the people that actually say stuff. You don't know who's carrying news. And everybody wants to be on the manager's good side. Everybody's willing to throw you under the bus and lick ass. But you've just got to understand that a lot of these managers are incompetent, and they are very paranoid. Managers who are going through it are very good at being able to see where the strength in the team lies. And they're either going to see you as an ally yourself, or they're going to see you as a problem. And you need to get ahead of that and control that narrative by controlling the manager before the manager gets to a point where they see you as a threat. As soon as the manager sees you as a threat, that's a slippery slope to them trying to make your life difficult and getting you out. So I just really wanted to point that out and say that. And I know that a lot of you guys have difficult managers or find it difficult to work with a manager. And don't get it twisted. When it has been uncomfortable to the point of unbearable, where that knot is at the bottom of my stomach, best believe, as soon as that knot is in my stomach, I'm looking for new opportunities and I'm leaving. Because ultimately as well, my hairline has just returned back from down south and it's come back. I'm not ready for my hairline to continue receding because I've got a mad manager that can't control her emotions every month, or he can't control his ego because he knows he's crap at his job and I could easily take over his job in a blink of an eye. So he thinks that by bullying me or making me uncomfortable, then he's going to show me and flex his muscle about who's boss. You have to be in control of your own career and stop looking for managers to co-sign your career, co-sign your hard work when they probably haven't even worked hard to be where they are. So before I close this episode, there was something that I saw on Twitter and I really want to read it to you. And then I will do some recommendations of TV programs that I think you guys should watch. So this is what I saw on Twitter and I really want to share it with you guys and I hope you guys find it helpful. Being a black woman in tech can be lonely. I have vivid memories of being the only black person in the entire department, having to experience microaggressions during Friday drinks, being gaslighted when you call them out, and then labelled as antisocial when you don't want to join for drinks next time. Experiences like this have made me culture vet companies before joining, always picking a good culture fit because the extra pay wouldn't be worth it if I was to assimilate and mask my true self at work. Having said this, I'm hopeful because tech today is a lot more diverse than it was at the beginning of my career, and as a whole, it's a super progressive industry that actively pushes for change. I could have written that myself. I read that and I thought, do you know what? That is everything I am talking about here in this episode. The only thing I would say is hard to culture vet a company before you've joined. They will sell you how great the company is, and I don't see how you can culture vet a company unless you're actually in it. Yes, you could kind of look at reviews on Glassdoor and speak to people maybe in your industry, but I found that the best way is in your organisation during your probation period. In an ideal world, yes, it'd be before you join, but you're just basing it on people's opinion, because there's certain places I've worked and people have said, oh, it's not really good, and I get there and actually it's a good company. And whilst I have their issues, I'm still able to acquire the level of experience I need to be able maybe to project manage my career in a certain direction, but I just need to be working there to gain the experience. So that's the only thing I would say, in terms of culture vetting. But yeah, I hope that you found this episode really good, and hopefully you can take some gems and apply it into your work life. Again, thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for all the reviews on Apple Podcasts. Like, every time I read it, I just feel so blessed. I'm just so happy. My heart dances. And all those who listen on Spotify and all the other podcast platforms, I appreciate you sharing the podcast. The power of sharing and the power of people recommending this podcast has led to the fact that I am celebrating 15,300 downloads since the start of this podcast. This podcast started on the 1st of January 2020, and that is absolutely phenomenal to be celebrating that amount of downloads. And if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be. And I'm super grateful that you guys choose to listen to me every single Tuesday. You share, you tell people to listen, because that is how this podcast will grow. And ultimately, I want to be able to reach all black women, as many black women as possible, to make their working life easier. This is something I didn't have. And since I've gone through the pains of the work life, I want to make people's work life easier through the podcast and the Toy Talks platform. So obviously, the BBC do commission some good shows. I give them that. And there is a show written by Michaela Cole, who I think is our version of Issa Rae. But Michaela Cole is a black actress and scriptwriter. She is a creative. She's absolutely amazing. And she has a series called I May Destroy You. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. All I'm going to say, it is a 10 out of 10. And it's very well scripted, and a new episode comes out every Monday. So I'm really excited because today is Monday. So I'll be watching that. So I would recommend that. It's called I May Destroy You, and that is on BBC iPlayer if you are catching up. Another programme that I'm really enjoying is Sitting in Limbo, and it's covering what happened during the Windrush, in terms of the fact that there were a few people who didn't have passports. And, we saw that whole scandal with the British government in terms of the way children of the Windrush era have been treated. And it basically charters, it's a series, and it charters somebody's life and how they were directly affected by a lot of the mistakes made by the government in relation to the Windrush. And it's worth the watch. It's very, very good. Also as well, there is another program called The Honourable Woman, and that is, just go and have a watch. Believe me, when I recommend shows, go and watch it, because I have good taste in shows. And also as well, a film that I watched most recently is called Luce, Luce, and it's on Amazon Prime. And it basically deals with the preconceived stereotypes, and also the uncomfortable um, the uncomfortable discussion around those stereotypes and how they purport themselves in everyday life. And it deals with issues of racism. It deals with like a bit of a psychological thriller, but I found it really interesting. I really enjoyed watching it, and I recommended it to a few people who have thought the same. 90 Day Fiance, obviously. If you don't watch 90 Day Fiance, you need to go and watch it. I flipping love it. I think we're on season 4, and I've just finished watching the reunion, and it's just some feel good TV. You know, you don't have to use your brain to watch it. You just relax, kick back, and it basically deals with people who meet on the internet and then decide that they're going to enter a relationship, and they haven't met. And the hope is that when they do meet, they'll propose within 90 days. So yeah, you need to watch it. It's so funny. So next week's episode will be a dilemma episode, and I've received a few dilemmas, and I'm going to be helping and advising those who have taken the time to write in, sharing hopefully some advice that they'll be able to utilize and use to resolve their dilemma, and hopefully a solution that benefits them. So if you have a dilemma and you want us to be able to discuss it here on the Toy Talks platform, please email me hello@toytalks.com. Those of you who haven't already, make sure you go onto the Toy Talks website, where we have masterclasses. You can listen to podcasts on there, and it's a hub for all things Toy Talks. Equally as well, we're going to have a new masterclass go up this week. It was supposed to go up ends of last week. However, I'm still editing it, and it's negotiation. It's negotiation pay increases, and I'm really happy to be sharing that masterclass with you guys, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I finished doing the trailer, so you should see the trailer soon, hopefully this week. And yeah, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to thank each and every one of you for listening, for supporting the podcast, and more importantly, for joining every single Tuesday. Connect with me on social media. I am on Instagram, Toya_Washington, or the Toya Talks podcast Instagram is Toya_Talks. Or catch me on Snapchat, Toya Washington, all one word, and of course Twitter, Toya_W. The hashtag is Toya Talks. Stay safe. Just because they are relaxing the lockdown rules does not mean that COVID has disappeared. It is still there. It is still claiming lives. And I would just ask you guys to not kind of fall for Boris Johnson's master plan of herd immunity. COVID-19 is still alive, it's still kicking, it's still taking lives, as I've said, because they have not found a vaccine. So just be careful, take care of yourself and each other. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.